Years later, Fucking found the legendary Lang Mountain. She stood at the summit, holding a birdcage in her hand. The wind blew against her robe, her long hair fluttered in the air, and as the morning sun rose, she covered her eyes, tears slipping through her fingers. Life is but a fleeting dream. She had never again heard someone play the qin, nor had she ever danced again. Princess Fucking was a chatterbox, the kind who could talk for 3 days and nights straight without pausing. Everyone in the palace was annoyed by her. When she could no longer find anyone to listen, she got herself a parrot, carrying the birdcage around as she wandered, never letting her mouth rest. People didn't want to listen to her, but surely a bird wouldn't mind, right? The palace staff often gossiped in private, saying the princess had fallen ill once, and when she woke up, she became like this. Before she turned 9, she used to stutter, but by some twist of fate, instead of stuttering, she became an unstoppable talker. So, Princess Fucking wandered around with her birdcage until she turned 15. One day, she happened to pass by the music bureau and met Anhu. Anhu, the qin player. She didn't see him first, she heard him. The sound of the qin enchanted Fucking. She followed the sound, step by step, with the birdcage in hand, and quietly sat down beside the qin player. For once, she stayed silent. Her maid was greatly astonished. The qin player glanced at them from the corner of his eye, but he didn't stop playing, nor did his expression change at all. When the song ended, Fucking couldn't hold back her chatterbox nature anymore. She praised the qin player from head to toe, then rested her chin on her hand, smiling as she asked, "What's your name?" The qin player turned slightly, his long black hair cascading down, and remained silent, his slender fingers playing another piece without a pause. No matter what Fucking said, he didn't respond. His indifference eventually angered the maid. She walked up to him, pressing down hard on the strings with a loud snap. "Hey, the princess asked you a question. Are you deaf?" Only then did the qin player raise his head, revealing an extremely elegant face. He turned to Fucking, somewhat surprised, and quickly stood up, cradling his qin as he bowed gracefully. Anhu, the qin player, greets the princess. Before Fucking could respond, he quickly added, "I truly didn't hear the princess speak just now. I beg your pardon. The princess was sitting on my left side and my left ear is deaf." This was the reason for Anhu's surprise, not because of Fucking's identity, but because she had been talking to him the entire time, and he hadn't heard a single word. Your left ear is deaf?" Fucking's voice trembled slightly, her eyes slowly brightening. Once she received confirmation, she nearly jumped up, holding her birdcage excitedly. "That's wonderful." Anhu let out a confused "ah." He hadn't had time to react before Fucking's fiery gaze made his heart skip a beat, as if the high mountains and flowing water that she'd sought throughout her life had finally found their match in him. He, of course, had no idea why she was so thrilled. There's a saying, "I may be ugly, but you're blind. I may talk a lot, but you're deaf." The news that the new qin player Anhu has caught the eye of Princess Fucking due to his handsome looks spread throughout the palace. Everyone felt sorry for the poor qin player, knowing how unbearable it was to be favored by the princess and her endless chatter. When Anhu heard this news, he was sitting under a tree with his qin in his arms, touching his left ear with a wry smile. No matter how intelligent a parrot might be, it could never compare to a living person. Princess Fucking adored his qin music, but even more, she adored his deaf left ear. From that day on, her favorite thing to do was sit on his left side while he played the qin, chattering away. He had no objection to this. No matter where he was always lost in the music. Staying by the princess's side even brought him a bit of peace, undisturbed by others. As for the rumors and gossip, he paid them no mind. But Anhu never could have imagined that one day, he would really fulfill the rumors and end up in Princess Fucking's bed. It was a night like any other. He was playing the qin for the princess, and when she grew tired and fell asleep, he was about to leave quietly with his qin, just as he always did. But suddenly, a storm broke out, thunder roaring and rain pouring. The princess woke up in a panic. Don't go. The wind battered the windows. The curtains billowed. Fucking's body trembled, and her voice trembled with it. Anhu, come up here. I'm scared. In life, there are many things to fear. Pain, hardship, death. But for fucking, her greatest fear was the thunderous nights of stormy rain. It was a secret known to no one in the palace. She hid it well, always trembling under her blankets alone, never calling anyone to her side, until Anhu happened to see it. Do you know? When it used to storm like this, sure, you would sleep with me. The curtains fluttered in the dark. Fucking clung to Anhu's sleeve, her voice soft and distant. Anhu paused, his eyes unconsciously drifting toward the birdcage by the bed. Shur-E, Fucking's pet parrot, named after her brother, the 11th Prince of Sang. Before he could suppress a bitter smile, he lay down as Fucking ordered, turning his left ear towards her. And so, with no fear of being heard, a quiet sigh escaped her lips. But Shur-E is gone and will never come back. Thunderstorms always seemed to drag on forever. Even after Anhu had fallen asleep, Fucking lay wide awake, counting the minutes until dawn. She called Anhu's name a few times, but when there was no reply, she cautiously stretched out her arms and gently wrapped them around his waist. The warmth of his body spread through her like a flood. Outside, the rain fell like a curtain. Pressing her face to his deaf ear, she slowly closed her eyes. Her habit of endlessly talking took over again, and she couldn't stop the flood of words from spilling out. I had a brother. His name was Qilin. He died when I was 9. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the white-feathered parrot in its cage. The bird flapped its wings frantically, hopping up and down, screeching. Died. Prince Huangfu Qilin, the 11th Prince of Sang, died in the summer of the 7th year of Xuanda, not yet 15. Because she stuttered from a young age, Fucking was not well-liked in the palace. Among the many princes and princesses, she was always the most insignificant one. The only ones who showed her love were Empress Dowager Ji and her older brother, the 11th Prince. Ji was gentle by nature, speaking softly and occasionally stuttering when flustered. Fucking resembled her in many ways. Perhaps because of this, the Empress Dowager had always been particularly fond of her granddaughter. However, the Empress Dowager's protection was limited. Out of her sight, Fucking still endured much bullying and exclusion. There were too many princesses in the royal family, and Fucking's mother, who had died early, was just a lowly laundry maid. This left her and her brother, Qilin, without any support in the palace, allowing anyone to step on them, especially the little crown prince. He was 2 years younger than Fucking, yet spoiled and domineering, taking pleasure in tormenting others. Fucking usually avoided him, but one day she couldn't dodge in time. Not only did she bump into him head-on, but she also accidentally knocked the string of pearls he was playing with to the ground, scattering them everywhere. Fucking's face turned pale instantly. She stammered as she crouched down to pick up the pearls, but amidst the mocking laughter of onlookers, she had barely gathered half when a bright yellow boot stepped on her hand. The pearls are dirty now. Even if you pick them up, I won't want them. You owe me an identical string, the little crown prince said leisurely, the grin on his face particularly harsh in the sunlight. As he spoke, he pressed down harder with his foot, causing Fucking to cry out in pain, tears immediately streaming down her face. Let her go. If not for the timely shout and her brother rushing over like the wind, Fucking feared her hand might have been crushed. Through her blurry vision, she saw her brother shielding her, his robes fluttering. He had already grown into a tall and handsome young man, towering over the little crown prince. Apologize to Fucking now. His face was flushed with anger, and even the attendants couldn't hold him back. The little crown prince, though frightened, still sneered, Huangfu Qilin, who do you think you are? Do you intend to defy your superiors? I said, apologize to my sister. Qilin roared, his fists clenched tightly, his long-suppressed fury erupting. Even the usually arrogant little crown prince was scared and staggered away, leaving with a final threat. You'll regret this. That regret soon came in the form of 2 days of confinement in a dark room. At the time, the Empress Dowager was away at Xinyan Mountain for a religious retreat, leaving the Empress in charge of the palace. Those 2 days felt like a lifetime. Fucking huddled in her brother's arms, her limbs cold as she fell into a feverish daze. It's all my fault for being useless. I couldn't protect you. I'm the most useless brother in the world. Qilin held her tightly, sobbing uncontrollably for the first time. He had been trying so hard to grow stronger, studying tirelessly day and night, mastering both literary and martial arts. He was willing to do anything to stop others from bullying his sister. But fate seemed so powerless, as if it had already been decided at birth. Somebody help. My sister is sick, please. Someone help us. Fucking's childhood memories were forever marked by the heart-wrenching cries of her brother. His shoulders were so thin as he pounded on the iron door, his hands eventually bleeding, leaving a trail of blood. Yet no one came. There was no light in the darkness, no hope. In her feverish state, Fucking crawled to her brother's side, grabbing his sleeve, her face flushed with fever as she struggled to speak. Brother, don't cry. You're not useless. You're the best brother in the world. Since that stormy night, Fucking had taken to sleeping with Anhu every night. It seemed she had found a joy greater than teasing her parrot. Anhu was not only skilled at playing the guqin, but he was also well-spoken and knowledgeable. He had traveled to many places, from the snowy mountains to the icy lakes, and he shared all the fascinating stories from outside the palace with Fucking. Fucking was both amazed and envious. Curious, she asked him, "What did you do before you came to the palace? How could you travel to so many places? Were you a merchant?" Anhu looked into her eyes and smiled amidst the fluttering curtains. "Me? I was a pirate, a fearsome one that terrorized the martial world. Do you believe me, princess?" Fucking's eyes widened in surprise, but after a long pause, she suddenly grabbed his hand and leaned in close. "Did you ever kill anyone?" This question caught Anhu off guard, and he choked, coughing hard as if he had been the one frightened. Fucking, on the other hand, stared at him with a mischievous grin and an unreadable gaze. "If you really are a martial arts master, I wish you could kill someone for me," she said. The words came so abruptly, so strangely, that before Anhu could respond, Fucking burst into laughter, pushing him playfully as he stood there, dumbfounded. "I'm just teasing you. You're so timid, even less daring than my parrot." That night, as the wind howled outside and the world fell silent, Fucking suddenly opened her eyes in the darkness. She turned to look at the sleeping Anhu beside her. Carefully, she snuggled closer to his warm body and whispered in his ear, releasing a contented sigh. Once again, it was her peaceful time, alone in the quiet of the night. Do you know what happened next? My grandmother returned and rescued my brother and me. She was so furious. Empress Dowager Ji had rushed back to the palace and saved the two children. Out of fury over nearly losing her granddaughter, she had, for the first time, openly confronted the Empress and took both children to live in her palace, personally raising them. You couldn't imagine how happy I was for the next few years. My brother began to gain my father's favor, to the point where he could even rival the crown prince. But then, in the 7th year of Xuanda, my grandmother passed away. As the first snow of the year began to fall, the palace prepared for its annual fireworks celebration, a ritual to bid farewell to the old year and welcome the new. The emperor, empress, and royal family all attended, except for Princess Fucking. When Anhu heard this, he was taken aback, while Fucking merely shrugged, watching the fireworks bloom outside the window. "I'm used to it. It's been 6 years since I last saw my father or the current Empress Wei." Her tone was soft, more resigned than regretful, though there was an underlying bitterness Anhu couldn't ignore. The reason for her exclusion was simple. When Fucking was 9, she fell ill, and a visiting Taoist priest claimed her fate clashed with the royal families. From then on, she was barred from all celebrations, and even the emperor and empress avoided seeing her. She had become the most talked about princess in the palace, yet the one with the least care or attention. As the years passed, she wandered the palace with her parrot, finding amusement where she could. The night wind rustled Anhu's clothes and hair. He stared at Fucking's wistful profile by the window, and finally, unable to hold back, he spoke. Do you want to see the fireworks celebration? As Anhu carried Fucking through the moonlit sky, weaving between the trees, Fucking almost screamed, her heart pounding in her chest. I told you I'm a martial arts master who can walk on walls. Do you believe me now, princess? Anhu said with a smile, the wind howling around them. Fucking nodded vigorously under the fireworks, her eyes sparkling like stars. It had been so long since she felt this happy. The taste of the sky, the freedom, was like a dream. They stopped in the trees, looking down at the lively celebration below. Fucking clutched Anhu's sleeve, a bit dazed. My father, he already has white hair, she murmured, gazing at the emperor and empress. 6 years had passed in a flash, feeling like a lifetime. She smiled faintly. But look at that woman. She's still just like 6 years ago. Radiant, beautiful as a serpent. Not a day has changed. Speaking of the empress this way was highly disrespectful, but Anhu said nothing. He only tightened his grip around Fucking, shielding her from the cold wind. Fireworks bloomed overhead, reflecting in Fucking's eyes. She reached toward her boot without much thought, then turned to Anhu with a mischievous smile. I really want to do something reckless right now, something that might even get you in trouble. Her voice was soft, innocent, yet her hand had already touched the dagger hidden in her boot, the dagger that had been with her for over 2,000 days and nights.
Anhu met her gaze.
Their clothes fluttered in the wind as they saw their smiles reflected in each other's dark eyes. Let me guess, princess. You're feeling playful and want to jump down and give everyone a scare? Fucking only smiled, remaining silent. Anhu stroked his chin and continued. If you get caught, the worst you'd face is a few months of punishment, but as your accomplice, I could lose my head. Isn't that right? His teasing words were carried away by the night breeze. Fucking's smile grew wider, and after nodding, she leaned closer, her breath warm against his skin. So, are you afraid? They had never been this close before, close enough to hear each other's heartbeats. Anhu looked down into her round eyes, his heart fluttering like a cat's gentle scratch. After a long pause, he smirked slightly, his voice tender and deliberate. If the princess insists on doing this, then there's nothing for me to fear, as long as the princess is happy. There they stood, in the moonlit trees, holding their pose. The night wind swept through their hair, while the world below buzzed with excitement. Among the branches, it was quiet and cold, as if they were the only two in the universe. They stared at each other for what seemed like forever. Fucking's hand quietly retreated from her boot, her eyes shimmering. Her nose had reddened from the cold, and she looked at Anhu, covering her eyes as if trying to hide something. This isn't fun anymore, Anhu. Let's go back. It's getting windy, and I'm cold. That night, Fucking talked more than usual, so much that Anhu could barely keep his eyes open. Outside, the fireworks blazed, and the palace bustled with activity. But inside their quiet room, only a bone-deep chill lingered. As the palace bells tolled, ringing alongside the fireworks, Fucking paused, her chattering coming to an abrupt stop as she burrowed into Anhu's arms. You're the first person to spend New Year's Eve with me in 6 years. Thank you, she whispered. Caught off guard, Anhu's eyes flew open, and he felt a warmth spreading across his chest. He froze. After a long moment, he slowly raised his hand and gently hugged the girl in his arms. And you're the first person I've talked to this much since entering the palace. I should be thanking you too, princess. Hearing this, Fucking looked up, smiling through her tears, and playfully bit him. Oh, so you think I talk too much, huh? Anhu let her bite him without flinching, a chuckle escaping his lips. I wouldn't dare. My left ear's unlucky, but my right ear is honored. Fucking burst into laughter, playfully teasing him like a little beast. Anhu caught her flailing hands and, sensing her icy fingers warming up, smiled in the darkness, content. The wind rattled the windows, and an eerie silence settled over them as the night deepened. This time, when fucking leaned toward his left ear, her voice was lighter and more cheerful. She whispered a string of New Year's blessings, like a child asking for candy. After a while, though, her tone grew serious. She hesitated, and then, cautiously, she spoke again. "Brother, I had a chance to avenge you tonight, but I hesitated. I think I might have fallen in love with someone. Would you blame me?" For 6 long years, Fucking's desire for vengeance for her brother had been burning beneath her calm exterior, like a smoldering flame. The night of that fateful summer in the 7th year of Shwanda was one she would never forget, a night of violent thunderstorms. Her beloved imperial grandmother, who had doted on her throughout her life, had passed away. The emperor's sons took turns guarding her coffin, and that night, it was her brother, Huangfu Qilin's turn. Fucking had always been timid, especially afraid of thunderstorms. Unable to sleep without her brother by her side, she threw on a robe, lit a lantern, and went to the ancestral hall to find him. The rain poured down in torrents. The tablet of Jishir Yutang sat right next to the coffin of the late Emperor Shangdi. The hall was deathly silent. The 2 siblings stood grieving in front of the coffin. Fucking leaned against her brother, begging him to let her stay a little longer. Just as she tugged on his sleeve, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the hall. Qilin reacted swiftly. What Fucking was doing was against protocol. They couldn't afford to be discovered. He quickly pushed her under the altar, instructing her to stay silent. A flash of lightning split the sky, revealing the visitor. None other than Empress Wei, her long dress trailing on the floor, a smile playing on her red lips. She entered with her attendants, and once inside, she turned and firmly shut the doors. Under the dim candlelight, her smile took on a sinister edge as she spoke with venom. His Majesty has praised the 11th Prince these past years, and the Crown Prince's position has become precarious. Fortunately, the one lying in the coffin left at the right time. Now that the 11th Prince's greatest supporter is gone, tell me, as the Crown Prince's mother, what should I do for my child? Upon hearing this, Qilin's expression darkened. He backed up to the altar and pointed at Empress Wei with a cold fury. "You're acting too soon. The Empress Dowager's body hasn't even gone cold. Aren't you worried about the risk?" Empress Wei took the medicine bowl handed to her by an attendant and approached him, her eyes gleaming. "That's not something the 11th Prince needs to worry about. I have my plans. There won't be any loose ends." Thunder rumbled loudly outside as Fucking, hidden beneath the curtain, trembled and wept. She wanted to rush out, but her brother blocked her, his hand behind him making the secret hand signals they had used as children during hide-and-seek. The message was clear. Don't move. Don't make a sound. The storm raged on, the world outside pitch dark, and Fucking bit her hand to keep silent as she witnessed a scene straight from a nightmare. Her brother was held down, forced to drink the black liquid from the bowl. Empress Wei's laughter rang cruelly through the night, piercing Fucking's heart. From that moment, her world shattered. That stormy night marked the end of her peace, robbing her of sleep for years to come. The official records of the 7th year of Shwanda stated, the 11th prince died suddenly at the ancestral hall due to heart failure. Princess Fucking, overwhelmed with grief, fell ill and remained bedridden for a year. No one doubted the Empress's kindness. She didn't kill me. Instead, she treated me with the finest medicine. Everyone praised her for her compassion, and even my father believed her. No one ever suspected my brother's death. They all thought it was an accident. I couldn't tell anyone, not a soul, except my parrot. Fucking clutched on his waist, her vision blurred by tears that fell onto his left ear, warm and wet. After that, she no longer stuttered. Her personality changed drastically. She forced herself to speak constantly because the trauma had nearly stolen her ability to speak at all. For that entire year in bed, she had been as mute as a stone. But she couldn't allow herself to be silenced. She had to speak, more and more, because she feared that one day she would forget. forget this deep-seated hatred. She began carrying a dagger every day. She knew she was no match for the Empress or the Crown Prince, but the least she could do was pretend she knew nothing, slowly getting close to the Empress. And then, when the Empress least expected it, she would plunge the dagger into her heart. After all, when a person no longer cared about their own life, that was their greatest weapon. Yet, even this opportunity for mutual destruction was denied to her. Empress Wei was too cunning. She brought in a Daoist priest who declared that fucking's fate clashed with the royal families, endangering the dynasty. From that point on, fucking was banned from all court ceremonies. She couldn't even see the emperor or empress in person anymore, left to wander the palace with her parrot, hoping for a chance encounter. She became known for her incessant chatter, her feigned madness. She was the laughingstock of the entire palace. To the world, she was the least significant princess of the royal family, whose only purpose was to highlight others' benevolence. No one cared about her true feelings. No one saw the fire she hid deep within. Do you think that woman would regret leaving me alive if she knew I had seen everything? Tears slid over her faintly smiling lips as fucking took a deep breath and buried her head in Anhu's neck. If I had met you, I'd probably have gone mad talking only to my parrot. You could never know, but the first song I heard you play in the Shangle Bureau was the one my brother used to play for me. It was called A Fleeting Dream of Blooming Flowers. It really felt like a dream. You played the Qin for me, talked with me, told me stories from all over the world, and even took me flying beneath the moon to see the fireworks display I hadn't seen in 6 years. Ever since my brother died, no one has ever done anything like that for me. No one stayed up with me on New Year's Eve, focusing only on making me happy. I'm so afraid that I'll wake up too soon, and once again, I'll be alone on stormy nights. I don't just like your music. I like your left ear, and I like all of you, because I know better than anyone else that you're the only one in this whole palace who truly cares about me. Fu Qing had managed to temporarily forget her troubles and spent the next few days in immense joy. However, an unexpected opportunity arrived in the spring of the following year, when the flowers bloomed. As if it was a deliberate arrangement by the heavens, the prince of the Qin kingdom, who had come to the palace to celebrate the birthday of the king of the Sang kingdom, accidentally encountered her in the back garden. At that moment, she was happily spinning around, dancing to Anhu's music, while playfully teasing the white-feathered parrot she carried in a cage. Who's ugly? You're ugly. All in white, looking like you're in mourning. So ugly. You're ugly. You're ugly. The parrot, 11, refused to back down, retorting fiercely. The banter between the girl and the bird under the sunlight caught Anhu's attention, making him shake his head and laugh, not to mention the intrigued Chun prince hiding in the flower bushes. After watching for a while, he turned to his attendant and asked, "Who is this amusing little maid?" The attendant, realizing the trouble, panicked. "Your Highness, this is Fu Qing." Pausing for a moment, he added hurriedly, "The other princesses of Sang are not like this." Perhaps by sheer coincidence, the Chun prince genuinely took an interest in the different princess. When Fu Qing received the news, she was utterly stunned. The emperor said the princess has 3 days to consider. If you agree, a feast will be held to announce it to the world, and he will personally send you off to your marriage. On the table lay an open scroll, intricately painted to depict the scene of her joyfully dancing in the garden with her parrot. Anhu stared at it for a long time, and outside, the willow branches swayed in the breeze. Unintentionally, he met Fu Qing's gaze. The air seemed to freeze as they exchanged looks, both silent. After spending so much time together, they had come to understand each other's feelings. He had watched her smile more and more, no longer wandering aimlessly around the palace, but instead engaging in music and dance with him. She was no longer just a talkative princess. She was a carefree young girl, and he loved seeing her smile. He wanted to see her happy forever. But now, their joy had caught unwanted attention due to an unintentional oversight. feeling uneasy under Fu Qing's dark eyes, and who suddenly cleared his throat and, unable to contain himself, said, "I've shared so many travels and stories with you, but I haven't told you about my homeland. It's beautiful, with spring-like weather all year round, blooming with lingxi flowers, each one exquisite and delicate. My people can sing and dance. Even small children can sing loud, clear songs that soar into the clouds, as melodious as nightingales. There's also a mountain, Langshan, that from afar looks like a beautiful woman combing her hair. They say if lovers climb to the top together, they can stay together forever and grow old together." He had never spoken so much in one breath, seemingly infected by Fu Qing's talkative nature, unable to stop. "If there's a chance in the future, I'd like to take the princess to Langshan to watch the sunrise from the peak. I could play music for you and you could dance there. Oh, and we could bring along your parrot and then—" This was the clearest declaration of his feelings. The light in Enhu's eyes pierced Fu Qing's heart, causing her pain. Unable to bear it, she turned away. "That's enough," she gently interrupted, as if exhausted, covering her face with her hands. After a long moment, she finally managed to utter, "Let me think about it." That night, the curtains billowed, and neither of them could sleep, each lost in thought. Until Enhu finally drifted off, Fu Qing sighed softly by his left ear. "The person who will accompany you to Langshan in the future will surely be very fortunate." His deaf left ear couldn't hear those murmurs as they broke through the cold silence of midnight, mingling with her tears in the darkness. "This time has been too joyful, so joyful that I almost forgot what I was supposed to do." A marriage alliance between two countries was inevitable. The emperor and empress would certainly attend. She couldn't care less about her so-called contradictory fate. This was her only opportunity in her lifetime, and she couldn't miss it, nor could she involve the one she loved. "What you can't take from me, even if you can leap tall walls, doesn't matter. The royal snare is one no one can escape." Moonlight spilled through the window onto Fu Qing's face, where tears still lingered. Yet, she gently wrapped her arms around Enhu's waist, resting her head on his chest, smiling foolishly. A fleeting dream is, after all, just a moment. It can't last forever. It's time to wake up. The golden hairpin, honed to a sharpness rivaling that of a dagger, was the final touch for Fu Qing. As the banquet reached its climax, when she would bid farewell to the emperor and empress with a toast, she would draw it suddenly, piercing swiftly and unexpectedly, ensuring that all present would be caught off guard, silencing her enemies with a fatal strike. This scene had played out in her mind countless times, and now, on this fateful day, she sat beside the prince of the Qin kingdom in her splendid red wedding gown, a smile on her face, but her palms were already slick with sweat. Across the music ensemble, Enhu sat with his long hair cascading like a waterfall, his handsome profile still as striking as ever as he played the qin. Yet, she couldn't bear to look at him, knowing how resolute she had been in her decision. She was afraid she had already wounded his heart deeply. When the wedding gown was presented, he had approached her with the last glimmer of hope, stepping forward to grasp her hand as if to take her away with him. She had violently shaken him off, nearly knocking his chin to the ground. "Wake up. I've made my decision. Don't hold on to foolish dreams. You're just a mere musician, no different from the parrot I keep for entertainment. What can you compare to the Prince of Chen?" He was rendered speechless by her harsh words, his face paling instantly. But she turned her back to him, tears streaming down her face. He refused to leave and was locked outside, while the cold wind howled through the night. She tossed and turned, unable to sleep, and finally rose quietly, covering him with her cloak. Tears fell onto his left ear as she made her final farewell in the boundless darkness. Heaven knows, earth knows, the moon knows, and the wind knows, but he would never know. Inside the palace, the candles flickered brightly, and the music began to fade. At the moment Fu Qing stood up, all her emotions were concealed. Strangely, she felt calm, overwhelmed by a sense of relief, finally free from the burdens of her choice. She gazed toward the Empress Wei, who wore an increasingly radiant smile, her golden ornaments swaying as if celebrating the moment they had all reached. Just as Fu Qing was about to rise with the prince to offer a toast, a figure suddenly broke through the crowd, kneeling in the great hall while holding a qin. "Princess, as you depart, I humbly wish to play one last piece for you. I hope Your Majesty and Her Highness will grant permission." The young musician in white, holding his qin with his head bowed, was none other than Anhu. In that moment, Fu Qing's heart trembled, as if she could hardly breathe. The enchanting sound of the qin filled the hall, playing the piece, Momentary Dream of Blossoms. It resonated as a poignant reminder of their first meeting, and now, wearing her wedding gown, the familiar melodies surrounded her like echoes from another lifetime. The Prince of Qin recognized Anhu's loyalty to Fu Qing and had urged the emperor to allow him to perform one last farewell piece. The music captivated everyone, and Fu Qing's eyes grew misty as memories flooded back. The fleeting beauty of the past felt like a dream. The night wind rattled the window panes, brushing against Anhu's flowing sleeves. His slender fingers danced fluidly over the strings, the music picking up speed, urgency rising with each note. He cast a final glance at Fu Qing, a bittersweet smile on his face. Suddenly, with a snap, one of the strings broke. The music ceased abruptly, and before anyone could react, he seized the razor-sharp string. Assassin. In the blink of an eye, the white-clad musician shot forward like an arrow towards the startled emperor and empress. The table was overturned, and the beautiful Empress Wei had no time to react before the concealed weapon struck her throat, blood splattering onto the ground, just as Fu Qing had envisioned her own demise. He turned back, amidst the chaos, locking eyes with her as she gasped in shock. Covered in blood, he smiled at her, reminiscent of that New Year's Eve night when he had hidden in the tree and promised her, as long as the princess is happy. In the end, he became her avenger, protecting her happiness, leaving no regrets behind. Anhu was a fox who wished to retreat from the world and live a peaceful life in his later years. He had no hometown, no name, no family, only a code name, the Fox. He was the perennial #1 on the assassin's list, wielding a soft sword that struck fear in the hearts of the Jianghu. But one day, the killer grew weary, picked up his beloved Guqin, and yearned for a different life. Thus, he became a newly appointed musician in the palace, now known as Anhu. With enemies scattered throughout Jianghu, the palace was the only place where he could live out his days in peace. He used the money he earned to set everything in order, choosing to live incognito as the least involved musician in the Shangyue Bureau. In his first half of life, he traveled far and wide, leaving a trail of blood, but in the second half, he just wanted to embrace his Guqin and cleanse his hands, once stained with blood. If he had never met fucking, it seems unbelievable, but he had never encountered anyone so talkative in the world, and she was a princess. Initially, Anhu paid no attention to fucking. After sustaining an injury to his left ear during his last job, he couldn't hear her incessant chatter anyway. He didn't mind at all. However, perhaps due to the careful recuperation in the palace, one day his deaf left ear suddenly regained its hearing, and that day coincided with a thunderstorm when fucking first beckoned him to her bed. She sighed in his ear, but she is gone and will never return. Feigning ignorance, he slept soundly until the dead of night, only to be awakened by her gentle embrace. For a seasoned assassin like him, even the faintest movement could rouse him, let alone being held tenderly by her. He had never been touched by a woman before, and he had to admit that in the dark, he subtly blushed. What he hadn't anticipated was that she would whisper such a sentence right by his left ear. "I have a brother named Qilin. He died when I was 9. From that moment, secrets began to settle in his heart. Each quiet night was spent together with her, feeling her tears and sorrow, yet she remained unaware. The more he listened, the more alarmed he became. It was hard to imagine such immense pain hidden beneath her innocent and carefree face. Tenderness and affection began to take root from that point on. As he flew with her beneath the moonlight, he thought that perhaps he had fallen in love with her. She stood among the trees, quietly reaching for the dagger. He clearly saw it but remained motionless, simply teasing her with a smile. He had not lied to her. He knew well the hatred buried in her heart. He was even prepared to help her escape once she made an attempt on her enemy's life. But she withdrew her hand. For him, she hesitated. "Brother, I had a chance to avenge you today, but I hesitated. I think I have fallen in love with someone. Will you blame me?" Her gentle voice echoed in his ear, and in that moment, he nearly shed tears. From then on, during every nightly conversation, he longed to hold her in his arms and wipe away her tears. He wanted to wait a little longer, until her smile became more frequent, until she could completely overcome her past sorrow. Only then would he tell her the whole truth and ask her if she was willing to let go of her hatred and live a peaceful life with him. He didn't want her to take risks, nor did he want to lose her. He had seen too many partings and deaths and had long since let go of such feelings. Unlike her, he understood that those still alive should live well so that the dead could rest easy. But unexpectedly, just when he thought he could slowly change her, the heavens would suddenly present her with an opportunity. He panicked for the first time in his life and found himself telling her a beautiful lie all at once. He had no hometown. The so-called hometown was just a tale he had once heard. He had always longed for it, hoping one day to climb to the mountain peak with the person he loved most. But the temptation of growing old together didn't sway her. The fire in her heart had burned for too long, to the point of being unquenchable. The only way to extinguish that fire was for him to do it, allowing her to live without her obsessions. Even if, by then, the one accompanying her would no longer be him. He had vowed never to kill again, but for her, he would willingly plunge into hell. For he always remembered the night when the cold wind howled, when she draped a cloak over him and made their final farewell in his ear. "If I could, I would like to watch the sunrise with you on Lang Mountain, but my brother is still watching over me from above. This is my only chance, and who?
I'm sorry.
We will meet again in our next life." What a foolish girl, still thinking that this affection would be known to heaven, earth, the moon, and the wind, but he would never know. After her departure, he gently opened his eyes and gazed at the vast night sky, staring for a long time before finally smiling softly. In a fleeting moment of brilliance, dreams leave no trace. It seems I must play the last tune for your farewell. 7 years later, Fucking found In Hu's last letter, and by then, she had become the Empress of the Qin Kingdom, with a son and daughter, living a dreamlike and fulfilling life. The letter was hidden in a golden hairpin, revealed only when the mischievous young prince accidentally broke it. The hazy fog that had enveloped her dreams for years, and the words he had never had the chance to say finally surfaced in the yellowed ink, stirring her heart. For so many years, she had deliberately avoided thinking of him, had tried not to remember the scene of his tragic death before the palace. But once she opened the long-written letter, everything crossed time and space, rushing back to her, impossible to evade. She finally understood completely. In the empty palace chamber, seeing her mother remain still for a long time, the young prince grew anxious and reached out to push her. "Mother, why are you crying?" Tears fell onto the letter, soaking the final line written by that white-clad musician who had smiled as he penned it. "The sunset fox rests on the grave. The children return home to laugh before the lamp. Life is wine, so one must get drunk. How can one drop ever reach the 9 springs?"